I always thought the quietest sound in the world was someone choosing not to speak your name. The envelope was thick cream-colored, sealed with a gold sticker pressed flat like a wedding cake ornament. I knew what it was before I opened it. The handwriting wasn't familiar. It was that clean, sweeping kind, printed by companies that promise elegant stationery for modern celebrations. My thumb brushed over the lettering. Nathan Calderon and Sabrina Langford request the pleasure of your company. And then it ended. No line addressed to Mom. No name at all. Just empty space where something personal used to belong. I turned it over, twice checked the back for a note, a scribble, anything human. There was none. The card held itself stiff, polished, and finished. A perfect object designed by someone who understood how to make something look warm without actually being warm. That evening, Nathan stood at the counter slicing apples. His shirt sleeves were rolled neatly past the elbow. His movements had become slower in recent months, practiced in the way people perform for an audience they've grown tired of. I stood a few feet away, the invitation resting against my fingers like a check I wasn't sure I could cash. I got the card, I said. He didn't turn. It's mostly for her family, he replied, voice level. We figured you'd understand. That was it. No smile. No suggestion that I sit down or ask what I thought of the design. Just a line rehearsed like a policy update. I watched him for a moment longer. His shoulders didn't shift. The apple slices stacked neatly on the cutting board like coins. Then he picked one up, ate it, and said nothing else. At the bank the next morning, I asked to withdraw a portion from the household account. I was planning to put something together for the engagement gift. Nothing large, just a gesture. The teller, a woman younger than Nathan, tapped at the keyboard. She stopped, furrowed her brow. Actually, you've been removed from this account, ma'am. It was updated 2 months ago. She said it softly, like telling someone their prescription had expired. I thanked her anyway, left the line with an empty purse and hands that felt less like mine. The walk home was only 6 blocks. I passed the grocery, the dry cleaner, the park, with the 2 worn benches, all unchanged. It was my name that had disappeared. Halfway down the last street, Darlene Hobbs waved from her porch. She was wearing that green visor again, the one she claimed made her look less tired on sunny days. I nodded politely. Heard the Langfords rented out the whole Whispering Pines banquet hall, she called. Must be nice, huh? I lifted the corner of my mouth. Just enough to qualify as a smile. Inside the house, the envelope still sat on the kitchen table. I hadn't thrown it out. It leaned slightly against the salt shaker, casting a thin shadow across the wood. The light from the window hit it squarely, making the gold shimmer. I ran a finger over the edge. The paper was thick enough to suggest permanence, or the illusion of it. Nathan passed behind me that afternoon on his way out. His shoes were polished, his tie pressed. He didn't mention the bank or the name that was no longer attached to anything in the house. He paused at the door long enough to glance in my direction. Then he said, without looking, "Try to rest today." He shut the door gently, as if slamming it would have cost him something he still needed. In the living room, there's a drawer we rarely opened. It held things I hadn't touched in years, the birth certificate with the faded corner, the bracelet from the hospital where he was born, one of his baby teeth wrapped in tissue. The ring from my husband sat in the same drawer, still inside its box, tarnished slightly at the base. I never wore it again after his funeral. The band was a little loose now. Skin softens with time, gives in, gives way. I held it briefly, turned it once between my fingers, and put it back. Later that week, I found Sabrina's social media post. It was public. A photo of the banquet hall's chandelier. The caption read, "So excited to celebrate with the people who matter most." The comments underneath were full of hearts and champagne emojis. Someone asked if the groom's mother would be giving a speech. Sabrina replied, "We're keeping things streamlined." I didn't reply. I didn't press the heart. I didn't screenshot the post or send it to anyone. That night, I stood at the window where the curtain doesn't close properly. The glass was smudged probably from Nathan's fingerprints. He'd always lean there while waiting for food deliveries, arms crossed, head tilted slightly, like his father used to do. A neighbor's porch light flickered across the yard. Somewhere down the block, a car started and reversed too quickly. I opened the drawer again. Not the one with the ring, another one. This one held old pens, expired coupons, a coaster with a chipped edge. I placed the wedding invitation inside, pressed it flat, closed the drawer slowly. Sometimes the cruelest thing people do isn't forgetting you. It's pretending you were never there in the first place. I didn't cry. That's not what this was. There are things too dry for tears, too small to explain. I simply sat at the table, hands resting palm down, and listened to the faint tick of the fridge motor. It kicked in every 22 minutes like clockwork. I didn't speak. I didn't move. I just watched the way the shadow from the envelope stretched toward me as the sun shifted. And I understood without being told that I had been erased with great care. Sometimes the loudest part of a room is the space I no longer take up. After Victor died, the house made different noises. The floorboards didn't sigh the same way, the pipes didn't groan as loudly. Even the wind changed direction, or maybe it was just that no one was there to comment on it. Nathan moved back 2 weeks after the funeral. He brought 2 duffel bags, a laundry basket, and the sound of footsteps that weren't my own. He dropped his keys in the bowl by the door, the same one his father had carved from red oak when we couldn't afford wedding china. On Sunday mornings, he'd come in from the bakery down the block with cinnamon rolls and the paper folded wrong. He'd talk about shipments at the warehouse or how the manager never refilled the coffee machine. He once left a note on the fridge in his old handwriting, orange juice. Not the kind with pulp. At dinner one evening, he looked across the table, spoon halfway to his mouth. "Don't worry," he said. "I've got you. Dad told me to watch out for you." I didn't ask when that conversation had happened. I just nodded the way people do when it would take too long to ask anything else. When Sabrina started visiting, I washed the guest towels twice and reheated her tea before she even asked. She looked at the shelves once and blinked slowly as if they were covered in dust I couldn't see. She stood in the hallway during her first visit and ran her fingers along the wallpaper, tracing the edge of a faded hydrangea print. It's charming, a bit vintage. I asked if she had any allergies. She said she was gluten sensitive, but not celiac. I looked up recipes, tried almond flour, ruined 3 batches of muffins. I told her I'd figure it out. She didn't reply. After she stayed the night for the 3rd time, I noticed the spare bedroom's curtains had been replaced with sheer white panels. The blue ones, the ones with the sailboats, had been folded and set on top of the dryer. I found one of my books, an old gardening guide with pressed marigolds inside, moved from the shelf to a box in the garage. When I mentioned it, Nathan shrugged. "She just thinks we could simplify the space. It's not personal." The lamp in the den was too yellow, the rug too textured, the dining chairs too squeaky. One afternoon, Nathan held up a fabric swatch and said, "She was thinking something cooler toned might modernize the room." I looked at the swatch. Pale gray, almost silver. I folded it and handed it back. I didn't say no. I didn't say anything. The next morning, Sabrina stood at the stove while I rinsed dishes. "Would you mind keeping it down in the mornings? The pans are a lot, especially when I'm still asleep." I wrapped the sponge twice around the handle of the skillet before setting it aside. I thought about saying she could buy earplugs, but I didn't. A week later, I noticed one of the succulents from the kitchen windowsill had disappeared. When I found it in the trash, still green, still rooted, it was bent at the base like someone had tried to force it into a different pot and given up. I started wearing socks in the house to muffle my steps. I kept the radio low enough to be inaudible from the hallway. I stopped lighting candles because she once coughed and opened a window. Nathan began speaking in collective phrases. We were thinking the wall could use a fresh coat of paint. We're considering moving the reading chair to the back room. We'll probably swap out some of the kitchenware. There was no you in those sentences. Just we and some invisible set of plans I hadn't been invited into. I moved the chair anyway. The one Victor used to sit in leather, cracked at the seams armrests, rubbed smooth. I rolled it into the garage, covered it with an old bedsheet, and told myself it would stay clean that way. Sabrina glanced at it once before it was gone. It smells old. I didn't reply. I just folded the sheet at the corners, tucked it under the base like I was dressing a wound. Nathan bought a set of sleek bar stools. The old kitchen table, round, scarred with years of grocery lists and dripping candle wax, was carried out while I was at the market. When I came home, he was adjusting one of the new chairs. It wobbled a bit. Fixed it, though. I stood by the doorway. The table had been heavy. It had taken 3 of us to get it in. I hadn't realized it could be removed so easily. Once, when Sabrina was out, I found a list written in her handwriting on the back of a real estate flyer. Replace entryway mirror. Paint hallway. Remove knickknacks from mantel. Frame engagement photos. Declutter. Teresa's items talked to Nathan first. There was a star next to the last line. I returned the paper to where I'd found it. I didn't take a photo. I didn't confront her. I just made a note in the margin of a book I no longer read. It was around then that I stopped leaving the lights on in the living room at night. I didn't want anyone thinking I was still awake, still available for opinions. At dinner one Thursday, Nathan poured himself water, filled Sabrina's glass halfway, and left mine empty. She looked at me over the rim of her glass and asked, "Do you still keep mayo in the fridge door? Or do you label things now?" Her tone didn't rise. It landed flat, like silverware dropped on a tile floor. I didn't answer. I reached for a cloth napkin, unfolded it slowly. I heard Victor's voice just faintly, somewhere in the back of my memory. Don't let them decide how big your shadow gets. But I'd already moved closer to the walls. Shadows don't stretch far when the light stays behind someone else. That night, I took the linen bag from the closet, the one I used to bring to church fairs, and began folding my sweaters into it. Not because I planned to leave, not yet, but because I wanted to know what it felt like to pack something that still belonged only to me. I zipped it, halfway smoothed the fabric, and let my hands rest on top. And in the stillness of that half-packed moment, I thought maybe, if I'm quiet enough, they'll let me stay. Or maybe they already think I've gone. There are things I remember not because they mattered to them, but because they never mattered enough. At Nathan's 30th birthday, the cake was too sweet and the lighting too bright. There were gold balloons on clear fishing wire, curling ribbons taped to the chandelier. I stood by the dessert table holding a glass of ginger ale I didn't want. Sabrina raised her glass at the end of the meal, eyes shining like she'd practiced in the mirror. "To the people who raised us," she said, "Mom and Dad Langford. We love you," the room applauded. Her mother dabbed at the corner of her eye. Her father smiled in that satisfied way men do when the moment goes exactly as they planned it. Nathan didn't look at me. He laughed into his glass, then leaned over to whisper something to her that made her giggle. I reached into my purse and folded the edge of the envelope I had brought. Inside was a card I'd chosen weeks before, printed on textured paper, handwritten with a short note. I left it on the table near the guest book. At the end of the night, it was still there, unopened. When Nathan received his promotion at the firm, he posted a photo of his father. It was an old image, Victor in a baseball cap, holding Nathan's toddler hand at some minor league game. The caption read, "I hope you see me, Dad." There were over 300 likes. Old classmates commented he'd be proud. His co-workers left rows of fist bump emojis. My name didn't appear. I knew it wouldn't. I read the caption 3 times, then closed the screen. At Sabrina's graduation dinner, I brought a bouquet wrapped in brown paper. Gerbera daisies, yellow, large-headed, bright enough to fill a room. I tied them with white ribbon and carried them through the parking lot like they were made of glass. She took them at the door, smiled thinly, said, "Oh, that's sweet," and passed them off to someone I didn't know. An hour later, I stepped outside to find a breeze. The back door was open. The flowers sat beside a bag of takeout containers still wrapped. I didn't move them. I didn't mention them on the ride home. One evening, I stood near the sink, scrubbing a pan that didn't need it. Sabrina walked past with a towel slung over one shoulder. "I think we should donate the Afghan in the den. It's too personal." She didn't stop walking. I traced the edge of the pan with my thumbnail, where a small chip in the enamel had formed a crescent. The Afghan had been a wedding gift from Victor's aunt. The tag on it was still sewn in handmade for warmth and memory. They boxed it the next day with some mugs I hadn't seen in years. The box disappeared while I was out buying tea. At a brunch one Sunday, Sabrina motioned to the waiter. I was seated on the far edge of the table near the kitchen door. "Excuse me," she said, gesturing toward me. "My fiancé's mom needs a hand with the elevator." There was a second of confusion. Then the server nodded. Sabrina turned her face back toward her mimosa, never once looking over. Not even a quick, "You okay?" The waiter glanced at me uncertain. I stood without speaking. I didn't need help. I just needed to keep the moment from stretching. There was a framed photo of their engagement on the hallway table for weeks. Nathan in a blue suit, Sabrina in white lace. Her hand rested lightly on his chest. Behind them, a blurred park bench and a line of trees just beginning to yellow. My reflection had been in that park bench when the photo was taken. I had been there just far enough to stay out of frame. I remembered the wind lifting her hair, the sound of her voice telling him to angle your chin up. It looks better that way. I ironed the dress she wore that day. Not because she asked, but because it was there folded wrong and I wanted it to look right. One night, I sat at the kitchen table folding napkins. Sabrina passed by, stopped and looked down. "You don't have to do that. The caterers will bring everything. No offense, but your linens feel dated." She turned the page of her planner without looking up again. The next week, new napkins arrived in the mail. White pressed with embroidered initials in navy thread SL. I placed the old ones in a drawer under the baking sheets, not because I was told to, but because there was no point watching them disappear one by one. When people talk about being forgotten, they imagine being left behind. My forgetting happened in real time. I was there in the room, in the photo, in the plan, and still invisible. It wasn't the silence that grew loud. It was the replacement. The space I'd once occupied being repurposed, repainted, reassigned. No one slammed a door. They just opened new ones without me. I found a box of stationery, once ivory floral edge, lined inside. I had bought it to write notes for occasions. Thank yous, birthdays. Small encouragements. I'd only used 3 sheets. One evening, I sat down and wrote a letter to Nathan. It wasn't long. I wrote about a time he had come home from school crying because a boy named Henry called his lunch weird. I told him about the peanut butter crackers I hid in his coat pocket the next day. I sealed it, placed it under the new lamp by the stairs. The next morning, it was gone. I never saw it opened. He never mentioned it. When I dusted the shelf a week later, a new frame had appeared beside the engagement photo. It was a quote printed in gold script: "Family is chosen, not inherited." I remember standing there for longer than I meant to, not because it shocked me, but because it didn't anymore. That night, I opened the drawer in the hallway, the one with the leftover ribbon, expired coupons, and mismatched buttons. I took one of the thank you cards from the old stationery set. I wrote nothing. I just held the pen over the blank space where a message should be. Then I placed it untouched back in the envelope. Some things are most honest when left blank. Some betrayals don't scream, they arrive folded, stapled, and printed in triplicate. The documents were already on the table when I came downstairs. 3 stacks, 2 pens, a plate of pastries arranged with a linen napkin tucked beneath them, the kind Sabrina liked to fold at an angle. The coffee had already been poured decaf, no sugar, no cream. My cup was to the right of the folder, still steaming. Sabrina gestured to the seat opposite hers. "It's nothing urgent. We were talking with a lender just casually. They suggested cleaning up the deed. One name is cleaner. Fewer questions." Nathan sat next to her, arms crossed. He didn't speak right away. He tapped his thumb against his watchband. The gesture was slow, controlled, like someone waiting for a train that was scheduled to arrive exactly on time. I pulled the chair back and sat down. The folder was heavy. I didn't open it yet. Sabrina smiled, but only with her mouth. "It's just logistical. Paperwork can get messy with widows." The word sat between us. I didn't move. Nathan cleared his throat. "We're not kicking you out. It's still your home. This is just to make sure we can do things right. Fix up the kitchen. Refinance. Build equity." I looked at the coffee. The surface rippled slightly when I moved the spoon, like it had something to say, but wasn't ready to speak. She leaned forward, one hand resting lightly near mine. "We'd even renovate your bathroom, widen the doorway, add grab bars. You deserve comfort." The pen was already uncapped, blue ink, heavy barrel, the kind that left a slight dent in your fingers after too long. She pushed the papers closer. "You shouldn't have to think about taxes or forms or maintenance. You've done enough. Let us carry this now." I opened the folder slowly. The pages were clipped at the corner. Legal terms I recognized from when Victor and I bought the house. My name was still there, centered at the top, just above a blank line meant for a signature. The space was narrow, deliberate, meant for one stroke. Nathan didn't look up. His knee bounced once under the table, then stopped. I flipped to the second page. A copy of the property summary. Then the third language about release of rights, verification of identity. My birth date spelled correctly. The square footage of the house rounded down. My name appeared again, this time followed by a line that said in small type, "Hereby transfers full interest to the second party." Sabrina poured more coffee into my cup. "It's just easier this way, for all of us." I set the spoon down and folded my hands. The ring Victor had given me during our 10th anniversary slipped slightly, the band now looser with time. "I'll think about it." Sabrina paused mid-pour. She didn't blink, but her smile stayed in place. Nathan let out a short breath, almost silent. She folded the napkin back over the plate of pastries. "Of course. No rush." That evening, I waited until the lights dimmed upstairs. Their bedroom door closed with that same soft click they always used, like privacy was a fragile thing. I went back to the table folder, still resting where I'd left it. I opened it again, this time slower. Not to read, just to check. The last page had a scanned copy. Not my signature, but it looked close. Tilted just the way mine slanted in 2002 when arthritis hadn't yet softened my grip. I traced the curve of the T, the curl in the loop, the slight hesitation before the second E, all there, all practiced. The date beside it was last month. There was no note, no explanation, just initials in ink and a witness line signed in Sabrina's handwriting. I closed the folder and placed it back in the drawer. Not hidden, not thrown away, just shelved like something waiting to be proven wrong. Upstairs, the floor creaked softly under someone's steps. Maybe hers, maybe his. In the hallway, one of the picture frames had been turned slightly on the wall. It used to hang straight. Victor had measured it once with a level. I straightened it again. When I returned to the kitchen, the coffee cup was still on the table. Cold now. A faint ring marked the wood, thin as a pencil line. I wiped it once lightly, but the stain held. I thought about the time Victor spilled wine during dinner with his boss. He'd laughed, made a joke about aging furniture with character. Then he looked at me across the table and said, "We keep what marks us. It's how we remember what survived." I didn't take the documents to the trash. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't raise my voice or lock my door. I just pressed the tip of the pen into my palm hard enough to feel the metal, but not enough to bruise, and I let the silence answer for me. I stopped looking for my slippers beside the bed. They had been moved again. Third time this week, folded into a corner, paired unevenly. Downstairs, Nathan watched something on TV, volume low, face lit by passing frames. Sabrina sat on the couch's edge, her laptop balanced neatly across her knees. She wore earphones, but her lips still moved slightly. I waited a moment. No one looked up. My cardigan was already folded over the handle of the duffel bag. One pocket held my pill organizer, a pen with fading ink, and the list of injection dates I copied from the fridge calendar weeks ago. The other pocket held a photo of Victor, one where he's wearing a windbreaker too big for his shoulders, smiling without showing his teeth. He never liked pictures. I kept the only one he didn't throw away. I wrapped the dried lavender from the kitchen windowsill in wax paper and tucked it beside my journal. The stems cracked once sharply before settling. I didn't speak. I didn't leave a speech or a story or a sigh. Only a folded piece of paper on the kitchen counter. I wrote, "I'll be away for a while. Don't wait for me at dinner." No apology, no location. I stepped into the hallway, adjusted the scarf around my neck, and looked once at the ceramic teapot by the window, the same one Sabrina had commented on last month. So chipped. Honestly, it's depressing. I placed it gently back onto the sill handle, turned slightly inward. I didn't dust it. The bus station was quiet. I paid in cash. The driver didn't ask questions. In the seat beside me, I folded my coat tighter around my chest. It was the last gift Victor gave me. Light gray with worn cuffs. One button loose at the collar. I kept it fastened anyway. I didn't check my phone during the ride. I already knew there would be no missed calls. They would read the note. They would finish the show. They would eat whatever was left in the fridge. At the next town over, I walked 2 blocks to the small complex near the bakery. The studio was clean, but hollow. I didn't mind. It had a window that opened a working lock and no voices in the walls. I bought a cheap flip phone. New number, no contacts. I didn't save Nathan's. The next morning, I laid out the papers on the fold-out table. I still had the originals. Not the copies Sabrina kept in the file drawer beside the dishwasher. Those were scanned, highlighted, missing things. Mine were older, heavier, notarized in blue ink with embossed stamps pressed deep into the paper. I ran my finger over one of the raised seals. The paper had held its shape. I hadn't. I took the envelope I had labeled property, full ownership, and slid it into my canvas purse. Then I picked up the yellow folder marked Utilities, Deeds, Wills. I didn't bring anything else. The law office still had the same sign, Russell Quinn, attorney at law. Brass letters tarnished at the edges. His assistant recognized me. I didn't use the waiting room. Russell opened the door himself. "You look thinner," he said gently. I handed him the folder. He pulled out the paperwork, adjusted his glasses, and read in silence. I watched the corner of his mouth pull tight. "Did they threaten you?" he asked. I shook my head. "Did they forge anything?" I opened the back flap of the folder and pulled out the scanned copy. I pointed to the signature. His eyes darkened. "I've seen worse," he said, "but this is enough." I didn't nod, I didn't blink, I just waited. He flipped to the deed and tapped it once with his pen. "We can reverse this. Quietly. But it'll take time." I unzipped the side of my bag and removed a slim envelope marked Trust, Victor C. Inside was a copy of our original will, the one from 1996, the one Sabrina never knew existed. Russell held it for a long moment. Then he folded it shut and leaned back in his chair. "You're sure about this?" I folded my hands in my lap. "There's no going back," he added, "once we start." I looked at the cuff of my coat. The stitching had come loose at the wrist. A thread dangled pale against the wool. He didn't push again. Just pulled a new folder from his desk drawer and began to sort the documents. When I left the office, I walked slowly. Past the bakery. Past the post office. I didn't buy anything. I didn't call anyone. I just counted the cracks in the sidewalk under my shoes. Back at the studio, I hung the coat on a nail by the door. It sagged slightly. I didn't fix it. I didn't unpack the duffel. I only took out the photo of Victor and set it on the windowsill. The glass had a slight smudge, like someone once tried to clean it and gave up halfway. I left it. Sometimes retreat isn't surrender. It's the refusal to stand where you're not seen. Some mornings, I forget the silence isn't temporary. I used to pause before opening the fridge, as if waiting for someone to comment on how loudly the jars clinked. Now the sound of the butter knife scraping toast feels like a ceremony. It doesn't announce anything. It just happens. The studio is small, the kind of space people rent between endings and beginnings. My closet has 7 hangers, none of which match. I keep a sweater that doesn't go with anything else just because I chose it, without asking what someone else thought of the color. There's a little glass lamp with amber trim sitting on the windowsill. I bought it secondhand, $5 and 1 chip on the base. At night, when it glows, the whole room turns the color of dried apricots. It hums just a little, like something trying to stay alive. I make my coffee on a hot plate. I measure the grounds by memory, 1 spoon for strength, 2 for proof. I drink it out of a ceramic mug, with a hairline crack down the handle. It's still strong enough to hold warmth, and I suppose that's something. On the 3rd day, I remembered I used to like mysteries. I walked to the bookstore and bought a used copy with curled corners and someone else's underlines. I read until the words blurred. Then I flipped back to page 1 and started again. This time I used a pencil to mark the parts I wanted to reread, not for plot, but because they sounded like something I'd once said out loud. I've started keeping receipts. Not for budgeting, for documentation. They're folded in a Ziploc bag behind the bread box. I write the date, time, and weather on the back of each one, not because I plan to show them to anyone, but because they prove I was there. On the 6th morning, Ruth Myers called. She's the kind of woman who bakes in bulk and never needs a reason to knock. I hadn't told her anything. Just disappeared from the neighborhood like a missing planter pot. "Are you all right?" I'm not where I was. And where are you now? Somewhere in between. It's quieter here. That sounds like a beginning. I'm learning not to need the noise. You always were better at soft things. Maybe I forgot. The lawyer, Mr. Quinn, left a voicemail. I listened to it twice before deleting it. His voice didn't rush. He used words like authentic and chain of custody and retained counsel. All I heard was the pause before each sentence, like he was giving me space to decide if I still wanted to be seen. I pressed my fingers against the folder of documents and let them rest there. It wasn't fear. It was more like checking if the paper still had weight. No one had asked me where I'd gone. Not Nathan. Not Sabrina. Not even a, "Did you arrive safely?" or "Are you staying warm?" The phone stayed still on the nightstand. No blinking lights, no missed calls. It was strange how the absence of sound could feel like someone whispering you out of existence. There's a corner bakery downstairs. I don't go in often, but once I sat at the window table with a lemon tart. A child walked by and waved. Not at me, but at her reflection in the glass. I almost lifted my hand anyway. I found the ring. It had been in the lining of my old coat, wrapped in a bit of Kleenex. It's not worth much, just a thin band with a shallow scratch down the middle. My husband once twisted it gently back into shape after I'd caught it in the laundry chute. I wear it now when I wash dishes. Not to remember him. To remember the part of me that didn't vanish when he did. A woman in the laundry room asked if I lived alone. I told her yes. She nodded like that meant something more than numbers. I think people assume loneliness by square footage. I think it's just the echo of your own breath when you stop apologizing for taking up space. The floors here are uneven. The sink leaks. One of the ceiling tiles is bowed in the middle like it holds a secret. Still, it's mine. I found an old radio at the thrift store. It only plays one station, classical, no commercials. The announcer never says his name. I imagine he's someone who once worked in a big city, and now he just sends Bach and Vivaldi into small kitchens like mine. I let it play during breakfast. Not because I like the music, because it fills the air with something that doesn't expect a reply. Every night, I fold my cardigan across the back of the chair. Not because anyone cares where it goes. Because I do. I water a plant I bought for $3 a pothos, they called it. Low maintenance. Forgiving. I keep it by the bathroom sink and speak to it sometimes. Not in words. Just with presence. I've started writing my name again on mail, forwarding slips on library cards, on forms that don't require it, but have space anyway. I use a pen with blue ink and press down hard. Not because I'm afraid of being erased, because I want the page to remember I was here. The sky outside is the color of milk before the sun wakes it. I don't need to open the window to feel the air. I just breathe. And this morning it's enough. I no longer expect the knock to come with warmth. When the envelope arrived, it had no return address, but the font on the sticker was Sabrina's usual sharp, narrow, a little too neat for something heartfelt. Inside, a reprint of the engagement invitation. This time, my name appeared, Teresa Calderon, with appreciation. The words floated on the page like someone else's title. Not quite apology. Not quite welcome. Just necessary. Ruth found me in the hallway later that day. She looked down at the envelope in my hand, then said without preamble, "Darlene heard the Langfords are nervous. You might not show. Bad optics for their new venture." She paused, then added, "They want you visible, not present. Just there." I nodded. I didn't explain. She didn't ask. That afternoon, I folded laundry slower than usual. The hem of an old blouse brushed against my wrist. There was a time I wore that blouse to meet Nathan's teacher's bake sale committee's a few job interviews. It still smelled faintly of starch and habit. The next message came from Nathan. Short. Informal. "Hey, Mom, everything okay? We were wondering if you'd like to attend the engagement dinner after all." I read it twice before putting the phone face down on the table. A few minutes later, another tone. Sabrina, this time her email signed by both their names. "It'd be good for the family optics if you were there. People talk. You know, no, how have you been? No, we miss you. Just concern over the audience, not the missing character." I made myself tea. It wasn't about calm. It was about doing something quiet with my hands. The steam fogged the glass lid as I poured into the chipped cup I'd bought from the thrift store on my third day here, amber-colored with a small crack along the base. Still useful. The third message came late that night, Nathan's voice through the phone, uneasy. The loan, it's been delayed. Something about deed verification. Did you take something from the file? I let the question hang. Then, I'm not lost, Nathan. Just not where you expect me to be. He hesitated. There's been confusion. Sabrina thinks it's best if we clear things up together, maybe in person. I didn't reply. The cup in my hand had gone cool. I rinsed it out, dried it, set it back on its shelf. 2 days later, I found a second envelope. This one had a post-it inside. Please reconsider. It matters that you show up. S and N. Not we miss you. Just reconsider. Just show up. I walked to the market after that, bought peaches. Not because I wanted them, but because they used to be Nathan's favorite when he was 8. He never peeled them, just bit in juice dripping down his chin. He once told me, Mom, these taste like summer. He hadn't said that in years. Outside the store, Ruth met me with her own bag of groceries. She looked at my face and didn't speak. We walked 2 blocks together. At the corner, she stopped. You know you don't owe them anything. Right? I shrugged. I know. They think you'll cave. Make it easy. Smile for photos, smooth out the story. I looked down at the receipt sticking out of my pocket. Ink, still fresh. $6.34 for fruit that wouldn't be eaten. They didn't ask how I've been, I said. They just want me centered in their frame. Ruth nodded once tight. At home, I opened a drawer and pulled out the folder where I kept originals papers they thought were lost. Property title, utility bills. Victor's signed letters from the contractor. I placed the invitation on top like an afterthought. Later that week, a manila envelope slid under my studio door. Legal stationery. I didn't open it immediately. I boiled water first. Rinsed my cup again. Added lemon this time. When I opened it, I found a copy of the initial deed transfer. Highlighted in pink, the line where Sabrina had inserted her name. Below that, a note from Quinn in blue ink. Let me know if you're ready to file. I folded it shut, tucked it beneath the amber lamp. The phone rang again. This time it was Nathan. I talked to the loan officer again. They said something about a hold. The name discrepancy. I don't know what's happening. You should speak to your fiancé, I replied. A pause. Then she's under a lot of pressure. We both are. I waited. Look, Mom, I know things have been strained, but it would help if you showed up. For us. For the family. Another beat. Just for the photos, if nothing else. The line buzzed gently in my hand. I could hear his breath, but not his heart. After he hung up, I walked to the window. A pigeon flapped once, then settled on the sill. It looked at me, didn't fly away. Some things don't move unless you do. I went to the cupboard, took down the peach. I peeled it with a knife, slowly letting the skin come off in one long ribbon. I placed it on a plate, ate half. The other half I wrapped in wax paper and set aside. When the next invitation came, I left it unopened. I placed it next to the old one, both resting beneath the glass lamp. They could keep sending versions until one felt right, or until silence answered for me. I never liked the sound of my name when it was said with a purpose behind it. The form asked for hobbies. I wrote reading, then erased it. I tried again, observing. It stayed. At the table beside me, someone stirred tea with a plastic spoon. It tapped the cup off rhythm. I waited for it to stop. The coffee shop near the flea market didn't know my name. That was a relief. They just handed me a receipt folded once, no small talk. I kept each one in a drawer at home, flattened and dated. Receipts don't lie. They never smile too wide. I met with a woman from the local library once. She wore a shawl even though it was warm and kept glancing at my hands. You'd be perfect for the reading group, she said. We need people with presence. I told her I'm not trying to lead anything. I just want to sit and hear a voice that isn't mine. She nodded like she understood. I'm not sure she did, or she... At night, I taught English to immigrants in a dim church basement that smelled of boiled cabbage and chalk dust. They called me ma'am with sincerity. One boy, maybe 20, asked, "Do you live with your grandchildren?" I shook my head. No, I live with my peace. He smiled. Not quite getting it, but not questioning either. That was enough. I found an old radio at the thrift shop for $6. I only played one-station instrumentals, no words. Every morning I turned it on just before breakfast. If the kettle whistled over the piano, I didn't correct it. I liked things overlapping without permission. Ruth came by one evening holding a bakery box and looking like she hadn't decided whether it was a visit or a task. Strawberry. They had extra. I opened the lid and looked at the neat row of hand pies. She watched me waiting. So she said finally, "What are you wearing to the dinner?" I dusted a corner of the table with my sleeve. Not shame, not silence. That's all I know. She exhaled through her nose like a sigh had gotten stuck halfway. They invited you, didn't they? A printed card in a neutral envelope. It arrived on time. Still, Ruth said they remembered. They remembered a slot on the guest list. That's not the same as remembering a person. I ironed my old olive dress the night before. It still fit. A little looser at the waist, a little faded at the collar, but whole. I'd worn it once at our 30th anniversary dinner when Henry made that joke about the overcooked lamb, and I laughed before I realized I shouldn't. This time the hem was straight. The buttons all intact. I stitched the lining myself again, slower than before, but cleaner. The fabric was tired, not weak. I carried a small envelope in my purse. Inside was a copy of the notarized letter from Russell's office, just in case. At the venue, a woman with a clipboard squinted at me, then smiled tightly. Oh, yes. Teresa, we've added you to table 4. There's a gift bag with your name on it. The bag was gold paper, folded at the top, a printed sticker sealing it. Inside a keychain, a discount coupon for some spa I'd never use, and a small candle. The label said, "Comfort." Sabrina's mother wore something sequined that caught light even in the shadows. She turned toward me, eyebrows raised. "Well, you clean up nicely." I nodded. Her perfume smelled expensive but thin. Nathan passed by without noticing me. When I cleared my throat softly, he turned. "Oh, you made it. Great." I looked at his collar. It wasn't pressed. He adjusted his tie. "Just, enjoy the night. No need for anything dramatic." "I left the drama in the filing cabinet," I said. Under D, he blinked, uncertain if I was joking. During dinner, they showed a slideshow of childhood photos. Sabrina as a toddler with a plastic crown. Nathan in Little League, one photo caught in the projector frame. Henry holding baby Nathan. Arms, steady gaze out of frame. I wasn't in it. Someone at my table murmured, "Where's the mother?" No one replied. After dessert, a woman in navy approached me near the restroom. "I've seen you somewhere," she said. "Church maybe I don't attend." "Oh." She paused. "Well, you must be proud. They've come so far." "I've watched them go," I said. She smiled politely and walked away. I stepped outside for air. The sky held no stars, only reflections of traffic lights on car hoods. The glass doors behind me muffled the sounds of clinking forks and polite applause. The invitation had called it a celebration of unity. The font was italicized. When I returned to my seat, someone had cleared my water glass. Sabrina passed by, not stopping. "We weren't sure you'd come, but this helps you know for the narrative." I ran my finger along the edge of the tablecloth. Narratives need characters, not furniture. She tilted her head lips still. Let's not complicate things tonight. It's already simple, I said. I showed up. You showed your colors. She walked off, shoes quiet on the carpet. I looked at the candle in the bag again. Comfort it promised. Unscented. At home, I placed it on the shelf beside my small radio. I didn't light it. Some things lose meaning when forced, and some names once erased are better left unspoken. I used to think silence was something you gave as a gift. Now I know it's something people take from you without asking. The invitation had arrived on ivory cardstock embossed with gold lettering and an unfamiliar tone, with appreciation. I held it for a while, tracing the raised letters like they might change if I pressed long enough. There was no note inside, just a printed smile pretending to remember me. I wore the dress I used to save for dinners I never got invited to. The neckline was too high for today's trends, but the stitching was even, and the fabric still held its shape. Like me, creased but whole. At the entrance, a woman with a clipboard glanced at me and blinked twice. You're not on the main list, but you're on the amended one, she mumbled, drawing a checkmark without eye contact. That was the first sentence of the evening, and it already told me everything. The room shimmered in champagne light. Linen napkins folded into towers. Crystal glasses positioned perfectly. Guests circled tables like planets around a shared sun Sabrina. She stood beside Nathan, her arm threaded through his, her smile measured like a sales pitch. I took my seat near the back, not the family table, a space reserved for respected elders, or those they couldn't quite erase in time. Sabrina clinked her glass. The chatter dipped. We're so grateful you're here tonight, she began. It's taken patience, understanding, and strength from so many. She looked out over the crowd as if sweeping gratitude across a field. Then her gaze landed on me, and especially Teresa, for her quiet grace and unconditional support. Applause followed, soft, polite, hollow. I didn't clap. I didn't smile. I glanced at my napkin, tracing a faint lipstick stain from someone who sat here before. Colin Blake, the event host, stood up and gestured toward the projection screen. The room dimmed. The video began like a family scrapbook. Photos of Nathan as a boy, front teeth, missing arms, outstretched on a bike. Laughter from the guests, a few sentimental murmurs. Then came the audio. She won't know, she trusts me. Once the deed switched, we're free. Nathan's voice. Recorded clean, no echo. No mistake! A second voice followed, light and precise Sabrina's. She'll end up in a nice little place. Maybe get her a plant. The silence that followed wasn't shocked. It was surgical. Forks froze midair. Backs straightened. Eyes recalculated. Sabrina stood frozen, her hand still resting on the stem of her glass. Nathan's lips parted, but nothing followed. I stood. Slowly. No rush. I adjusted my shawl, gray wool, unraveling slightly at the edge, a gift from a woman who once said I reminded her of her mother. This isn't revenge, I said. This is clarity. I felt every head turn. My name is Teresa Calderon. This is my story. My home. My handwriting on documents that were quietly overwritten. My silence mistaken for surrender. I took a folded paper from my bag and placed it gently on the table. My husband and I bought that house with savings and second jobs. I nursed him through his last breath there. I kept the deed, the real one. Russell Quinn, the lawyer, stepped forward from the far side of the room, quiet, but not unnoticed. Deed fraud, he began. Forged signature. coordinated removal of rightful owner, all documented and under legal review. I didn't look at Nathan. I didn't need to. I knew what his shoes looked like. I bought them. I buried my husband with dignity. And now I bury this story with the same. I removed my wedding ring. It left a faint indentation like a memory pressed into skin. I placed it on the satin tablecloth in front of me. It rolled slightly, then stilled. No one moved to touch it. Behind me, a few guests stood. Their chairs scraped the floor louder than applause would have been. I heard murmurs. She gave them everything. She was never mentioned. I wouldn't have shown up. One woman whispered, not realizing I could hear, "You don't do that to your mother." Not for a mortgage. Sabrina sat rigid. Her fingers gripped her champagne glass, but she didn't drink. Nathan leaned forward, eyes fixed on the centerpiece like it might dissolve. Colin cleared his throat, as if to move things along. I gathered my purse. There was nothing left to take, and nothing to leave behind that I hadn't already given. When I turned toward the door, the weight in the room followed. Not pity, not outrage, just the shift that happens when people realize the wallpaper was never part of the wall. I didn't say goodbye. Outside, I paused at the stone planter beside the steps. Inside it, a single white daisy bloomed in, out of season, slightly wilted, still blooming. I didn't pluck it. Not everything needs to be claimed to be noticed. Not everything stolen has to be retrieved to be returned. I used to think silence was something that happened to you. Now I know it's something you carry. The floor didn't creak the same way. I stepped carefully, not out of fear, but to listen. The air had changed. Lighter somehow. Even the corner where the old sideboard used to lean looked cleaner, as though the shadows themselves had been repainted. No one had touched that spot. Still, something had shifted. I didn't keep much. A kettle, a worn chair, the radio that only plays one classical station if I place it just right near the window. I kept the framed paper that hung in the front hall. Teresa Calderon, sole owner. Restored April 3rd. Simple font. Wooden frame. It didn't try to be beautiful. The box arrived yesterday. From the courthouse. Inside, new title documents, deed records, notarized filings. A final letter from Russell clipped neatly with a rust-colored paperclip, the kind that left a faint impression if you ran your finger across the page. His handwriting read, "All cleared, all yours." The last time someone said, "All yours," it was Nathan, handing me a cup of lukewarm coffee after asking for my signature. They never returned, not really. Not after the dinner, not after the lights dimmed and the projector shut off, and I placed the old wedding ring on the white satin. I didn't need them to. They'd said enough. Ruth came by last week with a box of marigold bulbs and a tray of lemon bars. She glanced at the certificate in the hallway. "Looks official." "It is. Funny. For something that was always yours." She pressed a thumbprint into one of the lemon bars and added, "Heard they're back in town." Separately. I didn't respond. I poured the tea instead. The good one, loose leaves brewed slow. Nathan's voice hadn't changed in the recording. That bothered me. I think I wanted it to sound different, older, cracked, regretful. But it was just him, smooth, confident, as if my absence had been a technical problem to solve. "She'll end up in a nice little place," Sabrina had said. I still remember the lilt in her voice, like she was talking about a stray cat. Their story unraveled without me needing to pull the threads. The company's board suspended Nathan for conduct review. Sabrina's family removed her name from the wedding registry. I saw the local news article once headline, "In a soft serif font, widow reclaims stolen home with quiet dignity." I didn't clip it. Didn't need to. The living room holds fewer things now. I rearranged the bookshelves so that none of the spines leaned. The corner nearest the window has a single chair, one Ruth helped me upholster in green tweed. Next to it, a basket with knit scarves I donate to the shelter downtown. No one has to know who made them. They only need to be warm. The quiet garden room finished last month. Just a small extension from the back porch with sliding doors and plants that don't mind poor soil. On Saturdays, we hold reading circles. Immigrant women, retirees, one high school boy who comes to practice English with his grandmother. They ask me nothing about my past. That's the part I value most. A woman from the group once asked, "Do your children visit?" I held up the book we were reading, The Namesake. I pointed to a sentence about identity, the way it shifts when no one speaks it. She didn't ask again. There's a key rack by the front door now, 3 hooks. I only use one. The middle one holds the new house key. I had it cut at a small hardware store across town. The man behind the counter noticed my hands. Steel file, he guessed. Sewing needle, I replied. You steady, he nodded. I hadn't realized until then how still I stood. Ruth once asked me if I ever missed the noise. What noise? Their kind. She shrugged. I turned the teacup in my hand, watching the last bit of honey dissolve. Noise doesn't mean presence, I told her. It just takes up space. Sometimes I imagine Nathan coming back, standing on the porch, unsure if I'll open the door. He might say I was young or it got out of hand. He might not say anything at all, just wait. If he does, I hope I'm wearing the olive dress, the one I fixed by hand with straight stitches and a hem that finally sits even. I won't offer tea. I won't raise my voice. If Ruth is beside me, she might ask what I'll do. I won't open the door, I'll say. I don't need to. I already walked through it and closed it behind me. I kept one last thing. A letter Nathan wrote years ago. An apology. His words were neat practiced, like they'd been rehearsed. I placed it in a small wooden box. Yesterday I burned it in the backyard stove. Not to forget, just to release it. The ashes clung to the inside of the stove like old dust. I swept them into the compost. Ruth planted marigolds the next day. They took quickly. I don't hang photos in the hall, not because I'm erasing, but because the house doesn't need reminders. It needs room. Room for language lessons. Room for people who say thank you without knowing what I lost. Room for someone like me who no longer waits to be seen. The nameplate by the door reads, Teresa Calderon. Below it in small letters I carved myself. No one gets to rename this house, or the woman in it.